This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
The World Health Organization says all evidence suggests the coronavirus came from an animal. On Earth Day 2020, conservationists say human quarantine is proving beneficial to the environment. Somalia unveils a program to help needy and vulnerable communities amid the coronavirus pandemic. Hello and welcome. You're watching Africa Live. We're coming to you live from Nairobi. I'm Hannah Viviers. Here's more stories making headlines this hour. In business news, South Africa announces a $26 billion stimulus plan to cushion the economy from the coronavirus impact. And in sport, Rwandese club APR eyeing a group stage appearance in the CAF Champions League. We begin with the latest in the COVID-19 pandemic. Here's a look at the numbers. Across the globe, confirmed cases have now surpassed 2.5 million. More than 170,000 people have died. The U.S. has seen a surge of more than 38,000 new cases in the past day. Total cases there top 820,000, nearly a third of the global total. Meanwhile, around half of all cases are in Europe, with Spain and Italy the hardest hit. Spain is the second country to surpass 200,000 total cases. Turkey is now a hot spot. Its total infections have surpassed 95,000. The Chinese mainland confirmed 30 new infections on Tuesday, 23 of them imported. All 7 domestic cases are in Heilongjiang province. Well, coronavirus cases in Africa have hit the 24,000 mark. Over 6,000 people have recovered. However, about 1,200 people have succumbed to the disease. Egypt, Morocco, and South Africa maintain the highest number of infections on the continent, recording above 3,000 cases each. Algeria, on the other hand, is maintaining a lockdown until April the 29th and is now reporting 2,811 cases. The government had imposed a full lockdown in Blida area, as well as a night curfew in the country's remaining 47 provinces. Algeria has also recorded the highest number of deaths so far. Of Africa's 54 countries, only 2, the Comores and Lesotho, have yet to report a case of the virus. Experts warn that Africa's fragile health systems may be overwhelmed as the outbreak continues. Well, the World Health Organization says all available evidence suggests the coronavirus came from an animal. It says there's nothing to indicate that the virus was manipulated or produced in a lab. The UN agency says it is still unclear how the virus jumped to humans. Last week, U.S. President Donald Trump said his government was trying to determine whether the virus may have come from a lab in Wuhan. The Wuhan Institute of Virology has strongly denied that, dismissing speculation that it synthesized the virus or allowed it to escape. The WHO's report finding the coronavirus was not man-made comes as disinformation continues to spread. CGTN's Timothy Ulrich takes a look at some of these claims and the effect that they're having.
5G towers, Bill Gates' vaccine, and a lab leak. These are just some of the conspiracy theories unleashed by the pandemic.
We still need information about what actually took place there. It's not just in the past. This continues.
That's U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. He's espoused different ideas surrounding the origins of the coronavirus. But he's not the only American official. President Donald Trump has announced the U.S. will be investigating the lab theory. And Senator Tom Cotton has been touting the idea it leaked from a virus lab in Wuhan for months. That includes in a Wall Street Journal op-ed. There are claims the head of the Wuhan lab involved in the conspiracy theory has denied.
There's no way this virus came from us. We have a strict regulatory regimen. We have a code of conduct for research, so we are confident of that.
There are 2 parts to this theory. 1, that it leaked from the lab. 2, that the Chinese government has been covering it up. And it's part of a family of claims, including one that the virus is a bioweapon China unleashed on its citizens. The WHO, French authorities, and U.S. military officials like Defense Secretary Mark Esper have come out against the theory. But many continue to believe it. A Pew Research study published last week found nearly a third of Americans believe the coronavirus was created in a lab. Spreading alongside the lab conspiracy are debunked claims China allowed flights to the U.S. from Wuhan after the city went into lockdown in late January. And these are cited alongside theories that China purposefully unleashed the virus onto its own population. It adds up to a hodgepodge of conspiracy, touted across the media by high-level officials and going unchecked, allowing for the spread not just of the virus, but also disinformation. Timothy Ulrich, CGTN.
Meanwhile, an article published in the medical journal Lancet is supporting China's measures against COVID-19. It calls China's work impressive, saying it can serve as an encouraging example for other countries. The article says aggressive interventions such as early detection of cases, contact tracing, and population behavioral changes helped contain the outbreak. It also says staggered relaxation of physical distancing measures in Wuhan in early April were the most effective way to reduce the number of infections. The article adds that temporary hospitals are crucial in relieving the pressure on the medical system. It says China must have made difficult decisions to achieve an optimal balance between public health and economic protection, and its experience would be closely watched as other countries started lifting their own lockdowns. Meanwhile, experts across different fields have spoken to CGTN about some of the criticism directed at China's pandemic control efforts from certain quarters of the Western media.
China has provided assistance to many countries in recent weeks, dispatching medical teams and sending masks to some countries. There are people say that China is engaging in mask diplomacy and questioning the government's motives. What's your insight on this?
In time of need, help is help. All right? People need the help. All right? And I think that's the most important thing. I do not believe China's motivation is anything other than wanting to act in a manner of solidarity, right? China has provided assistance to many countries. People should respect and honor the assistance that others provide. And that what happens is those who are in need to take. And those who are no longer in need to give. And that's how the world grows. That's how we develop a more peaceful world. And that's what China has been doing for a significant period of time.
It's not fair to blame China about that, because we have a lot of publication from the scientific community that prove that this kind of virus is not coming from a lab and it's not coming from China, of course. I think that also the World Health Organization already declared that they don't have one evidence. The world don't have one evidence that proves that this kind of virus coming from China. I think that this kind of argument is only express the racism and xenophobia, so it's not good.
Many people greatly underestimate the seriousness of this virus. Also, some people don't follow the guidance and regulations set by government. As a result, U.S. did not have a favorable result yet. You can see their problem most clearly in the New York City and the most big city from the Europe as well. These differences come from the fundamental difference between the culture in Asia and U.S. In Asia, people are more willing to recently work toward a common good. Also, Asian or leadership, government leadership shows better. That's why we can settle down easily.
There is mounting pressure from certain quarters, including in the United States, for China to pay for COVID-19 damages. What's the logic behind such demands? Earlier, Foreign Affairs analyst Adriel Casonata shared his views on the issue.
I don't quite understand the logic, because as we understand, the viruses are not human-made. So either the narrative which is behind the push to pressure China to pay for it is having in mind that China somehow created the virus as a biological weapon, and somehow this being created was, spread across the world in order to cause a harm to other nations, or which is more likely for me to create a precedent where the Western powers are punishing China just for being successful in economic terms. Just for somehow having one of the greatest economies in the world, just because of the China is quite recently gaining a lot of influence in the different institutions, including World Health Organization and others. It's like a spoiled kid who is not willing to play with you in a soccer or football, I would say, because he's losing a competition or a match with you. He's taking his ball and is going back home and is telling his parents that somehow it is your fault that you are much more skillful, or you are somehow more knowledgeable in the rules of the game. And this is what we are seeing with regards to America. I'm not sure whether Western politicians or American politicians understood that we are living in a multipolar world, that every single country has the right to have the equal say or equal influence, or right to seek the influence in the world. But I think that some of the countries, and especially here I'm talking about the United States, is not willing to comprehend the current realities. And that's why I think that China in the coming years will be perceived as an enemy, not as a partner, and is very dangerous trajectory for all other countries, which will have to choose between United States and China, which was also delivered by the famous international theory realist Mr. John Mearsheimer, who said that because of the economic interaction between Europe and other countries with China, and I'm quoting here, the jealous goals of United States will somehow try to punish them. And we are seeing this, which started during the so-called economic or trade wars with China in 2018, and it's just a continuation of the very same narrative. So I think that the fading hegemon, the United States, will not refrain, and I think that this pressure is even much more severe when it comes to other countries. So we will either have to, pick the sides, and if we pick the side with China, we will be perceived as an enemies of the United States. This is the reality.
The Group of 77 and China have released a statement of strong support for the World Health Organization. It counters recent criticism of the WHO by U.S. politicians. The 135-member UN coalition of developing nations, which includes China, emphasized the critical and central role the WHO plays, especially for the developing world. In Sunday's statement, the G77 called on all nations to strengthen international solidarity and multilateral cooperation and partnership in the fight against a disease that is, and I quote, our common enemy. Well, here in Africa, mining firms and some manufacturing companies in Zimbabwe are resuming operations in order to secure the country's economy. This is amid a national lockdown that was extended by 2 weeks by President Emerson Mnangagwa in efforts to curb the spread of COVID-19. CGTN's Farai Mokotuya has the details from Harare.
Security checkpoints are still in full force, but the list of people being allowed through has been expanded to include workers in the mining, manufacturing and tobacco sectors, as Zimbabwe tries to keep confirmed COVID-19 cases down while getting the country going.
Now, Zimbabwe's foreign currency is generated from what? From agriculture, it's generated from mining, and of course we had other professions like tourism and so forth, which are not going to generate anything until after the lockdown. But the essential elements of what earns as foreign currency, if you look at the platinum group of metals, if you look at all our gold sales, if you look at all of our tobacco sales, we're in tobacco season right now, where they've now decentralized the auction floors. Such production factors come into play, and we have to make sure that they run consistently.
The extension will confine others to a longer and financially damaging layoff. Informal business people like street traders and vendors, most of whom live from hand to mouth, say they could have also done with a reprieve.
The lockdown is really hard on us. If only they would allow us a few to leave homes for a few days a week so we can at least earn something to feed our families.
The government is planning to disburse cash payments to compensate affected businesses. However, many of them are unregistered, and because of the limited budget, the impact could be minimal. The lull in activity is an opportunity for overdue and necessary house cleaning.
What we now need to start seeing post-COVID is the full regularization of all the small enterprises and businesses. Where do they trade? Which sectors do they trade in? If they're in manufacturing, what are they manufacturing? What kind of raw materials do they need? Because it starts giving us an adverse effect of how they access foreign currency. At the same time, how many people do they employ?
That will see all economic players contributing their share to the national pie, giving the government greater capacity to assist businesses, both big and small, to survive through similar economic shocks in the future. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Meanwhile, Ghana and Burkina Faso have also relaxed some of the restrictions imposed to stop the spread of COVID-19. The move aims to ease pressure on the economy and alleviate the negative impact on the more vulnerable. Ghana has more than 1,000 confirmed cases, while Burkina Faso has reported over 500 infections.
3 weeks ago, President Roch-Marc Christian Kabore announced the closure of markets, schools, and banned social gatherings in Burkina Faso. But the partial lockdown aimed at curbing spread of the coronavirus has severely affected the local economy.
When the market was open, we could make a monthly profit of around $300 to $400 minimum. We suffered a lot by staying at home for almost a month. At home, we kept feeding ourselves and spending, whilst we had nothing coming in, so it is a loss.
We pray they reopen the market completely, and also all the other markets, because opening just the big market doesn't work for us. So if other markets are still closed, it will be a real headache for us.
Burkina Faso says all other markets would reopen before the end of the month if citizens comply with the anti-epidemic rules. The impact on the economy has been hard too in Ghana, but not everyone is comfortable with the lifting of the confinement measures.
I don't think it's the right time to lift the lockdown, actually. Even though we are suffering as a private business owners, but I don't think this is the right time, because you see the numbers keep increasing. And I think this is even the time that we have to put proper measures in place so that we can, once and for all, cure this and test everyone. And actually the hotspot areas, so that we can get this virus in control.
To some, though, the prospect of cash flowing back in is a breath of fresh air.
I go public toilets. I was greatly affected by the lockdown. Lifting the lockdown is a good idea, but it comes with its own consequences, because the sickness is still spreading widely. But survival for people like me during a lockdown is difficult.
You will find it difficult before.
While easing of restrictions is not the end of the epidemic in Ghana and Burkina Faso, it remains a closely watched measure. Other countries yet to lift lockdowns are keen to see how consumers and consequently the economy will react. Chamgono, CGTN.
Senegal's abrupt closure of universities and borders to curb the spread of COVID-19 has left foreign students in Dakar stranded. Some slept on the street outside their dorms for 2 days before they received accommodation in deserted off-campus housing. Senegal has so far reported over 400 cases and 5 deaths.
Less than 48 hours after Senegal ordered universities to close over the coronavirus, some students found themselves on the streets.
I remember my mattress was there. Here. My mattress was right here. I positioned myself in that direction. I spent the night. There were other students who were there on the other side. During the night, there were students right here. They slept in the middle.
Other foreigners rushed out of the country and city before flights were suspended and borders closed. Osman Isaka, originally from Niger, stayed on despite the conditions for fear of taking the virus to his home village of Bengu. Their institutions soon learned of their plight and set them up in off-campus housing.
We had to spend a lot of time on the beds, suffering while waiting, but we did it. In this context, in this situation, we really waited for solutions from our authorities, but still, because we spent days outside, we took advantage of other solutions that were brought to us.
Isaka's group of around 15 Nigerian students have tried to isolate themselves while maintaining as normal a life as possible. They keep up with their studies online, play football, and send regular updates to their families.
If I carry the disease, I can be a danger to my family because I will risk infecting them. That's why I prefer to stay right here. I actually feel safer here.
Regional freedom of movement allows many West Africans to work or study in other countries. Nevertheless, the sudden shutdown in response to the pandemic means some have ended up riding out the storm far from home. Jane Keo, CGTN.
An Egyptian billionaire has offered his firm's 200-room tourist complex to the Ministry of Health to assist in the fight against COVID-19. The chairman of the Palm Hills Developments, Yassine Mansour, is one of several businessmen who've assisted the government in its anti-pandemic efforts. They include the Sawiris, a billionaire family that have also supported the health campaign. CGTN's Adel Emrouchi tells us more.
Since the COVID-19 pandemic hit Egypt, the country's rich have come under close scrutiny. That's because Egyptian billionaires have been pressing the government to lift the suspension on real estate development work, with only a few of them showing concern about the risks posed by the coronavirus.
I have reservation on the pressure businessmen lead. Many of them do not appear to be compassionate with the human side of the crisis we are in. It will be necessary to resume operation and the economy, but the businessmen are making it appear negative. One prominent figure announced that he doesn't care if people die, as long as the economy moves on. It's completely unacceptable.
Lately, though, and after the government gave the green light for construction work to resume, real estate developers poured millions in donations. At least $32 million have been donated to fight the pandemic.
There is a huge segment of the private sector that has contributed to the society, but it didn't attract the spotlight. They've moved early. Unfortunately, we usually focus on some 20 big names in Egypt's business world. There are many small businessmen who took care of entire villages.
Donations are directed to fund the Ministry of Health's COVID-19 services, as well as financial assistance to needy Egyptians. Yassine Mansour, CEO of one of Egypt's leading real estate companies, has donated a 200-beds tourist facility, which will be turned into a quarantine hospital. It will prioritize treating medical staff, those on the front lines of fighting the new coronavirus. After numerous complaints about the effect of the pandemic on their businesses, Egyptian billionaires are finally moving to assist. Infection rates have recently grown significantly, so there is still a much bigger need for help. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Well, it's time now for us to take a short break. More news making headlines when we return, including Somalia unveils a program to help needy and vulnerable communities amid the coronavirus pandemic. And on Earth Day 2020, conservationists say human quarantine is proving beneficial to the environment.
Nigeria is my home. 160 million vibrant, ambitious individuals constantly seeking the perfect self-expression. It is these people who inspired me to be that person that is seen, to be a voice that is heard, and ultimately to be the anchor that I am. I have to tap in, tune in, and turn on the very best qualities within me to deliver the news. I'm Richard Nta, an anchor for CGTN.
Welcome back. Well, today is the 50th anniversary of World Earth Day. UN Chief Antonio Guterres is urging governments to use their economic responses to the pandemic to tackle what he calls the even deeper emergency of climate change. Guterres has made climate change his signature issue since becoming UN Secretary General in 2017. He cautions governments against bailing out heavy polluting industries. World Earth Day has prompted calls from many companies, politicians and economists for governments to pursue green recoveries. In the past week, Germany, France and other EU members have signaled their support for subsequent interventions to align with the goals. Where air quality is improving in countries under coronavirus quarantines, but experts say it's too early to speak of long-term positive change for the climate. CGTN's Rui Rittenberg reports.
These images from the European Space Agency show how pollution levels in China dropped between December and March, as much of the country responded to COVID-19 and went into lockdown. Halted production, halted emissions. It was a similar story in Italy's industrial north, Europe's first coronavirus epicenter. Infections shot up and Italians got shut in, a visible change as people stopped going to work.
If the economy stays slow, if transport stays down, we could see a drop in carbon dioxide emissions this year of 5% or more, but we've never seen that in the past 75 years, maybe going back to the end of World War II, when the economy kind of crashed as everybody came home and we stopped making tanks and airplanes and blowing them up. Only then did GDP really crater. And that's the kind of change we may be looking at now.
Venice's canals appear clearer, but practically no one is out to enjoy them. And across the Atlantic, New York City's streets are empty. Compare this to this, just a few months ago. Now, with fewer cars on the road, fewer flights taking off, and fewer gases being burned, some say Mother Nature is finally catching her breath.
It's a short term, okay, at least there's something improving. If you're asthmatic, it's much nicer to go for a run right now. It's not going to last that long. So as soon as everybody gets back to normal, these emissions are going to start, unless we decide to do something different.
The UN's World Meteorological Organization says global warming is a global crisis. This animation, based on satellite imagery from March, released by the German Aerospace Center, shows that a mini hole has opened in the ozone layer over the Arctic.
We know that the destruction of nature leads to the destruction of habitat, and that this is one of the reasons for pandemics. And with that knowledge, we simply have to act more decisively now.
Climate activists say climate change demands the same urgent and united attention as COVID-19. Hundreds marched in Brussels in early March before social distancing orders were in effect. Well, here in the U.S., Donald Trump has been no friend to the fight against climate change. Less than 6 months into office, he announced his intentions to withdraw Washington from an international climate accord reached in Paris in 2015. This year, the terms of that agreement come into full force and were scheduled to be reviewed at the annual UN Climate Conference in Scotland in November. That gathering now delayed because of the pandemic.
The danger of doing it in November is that we might find that some parts of the world who've got coronavirus later than we in Europe have done would actually be excluded. And that would be a disaster to have climate talks which actually exclude particularly poorer parts of the world from taking part fully.
The parts of the world, experts say, disproportionately damaged by the effects of climate change and disproportionately in need of a long-term post-pandemic solution. Rui Rittenberg, CGTN in Washington.
Well, let's shift our focus to Somalia now, where humanitarian agencies have urged the authorities there to ensure that they don't lose sight of other pressing needs of the country, even as they focus on the COVID-19 pandemic. CGTN's Abdulaziz Billah reports from Mogadishu.
Somalia has unveiled a social safety net program to assist the poor and vulnerable members of the community. Millions of them are in dire need of urgent assistance. Up to 200,000 households will benefit from the initiative supported by the World Bank under the country's National Social Protection Policy. More than 1 million people will receive the financial support. The government in Somalia says it will use $4 million each month to assist the poor. Estimates indicate that more than a quarter of the country's population needs humanitarian assistance.
This initiative targets the most vulnerable in the society, women and children under the age of 5. We are targeting 200,000 households in 21 districts from all corners of the country. Approximately 1.3 million people will benefit. People are staying at home because of COVID-19. Therefore, as a government, we are stepping in to assist.
COVID-19 infections in the country have gone up. Most businesses have stopped work or reduced activities, with many workers forced to go on unpaid leave. The situation is expected to have an impact on Ramadan, a month-long fasting period observed by Muslims across the globe.
The ban on local and international flights does not affect delivery of humanitarian or medical aid to vulnerable people. And with the onset of the rainy season, there are concerns that many families will require more support in addressing current humanitarian challenges.
A travel ban has been implemented in most regions of the country to combat the spread of the coronavirus. Aid agencies have also reduced their activities, with many opting to offer direct cash payments via mobile phones to beneficiaries. The ban on local and international flights does not affect the delivery of aid and other vital humanitarian assistance to vulnerable people. And with the onset of the rainy season, there are concerns that many families will require more assistance in tackling existing humanitarian challenges. Meanwhile, health agencies are warning that the latest rainfall will lead to an increase in waterborne diseases, including diarrhea and cholera, with more than 1,000 cases reported so far. Authorities have been urged to ensure that the humanitarian situation doesn't worsen, with a focus now on containing COVID-19. Abdulaziz Bilo, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
Chinese President Xi Jinping has inspected poverty alleviation work in northwest Shanxi province. She visited a community, a township hospital, a primary school, and a tea farm in Ankang City on Tuesday. He expressed confidence in eradicating absolute poverty while visiting the community, but Xi said he is concerned about whether there will be a long-term mechanism to ensure stability there. Meanwhile, the president stressed physical fitness during his visit to the primary school. Xi's inspection comes as China seeks to eliminate extreme poverty by the end of this year. It's time now for us to take a short break. Your business news is coming up next. Here's what you can expect. South Africa announces a $26 billion stimulus plan to cushion the economy from the coronavirus impact. And we take a look at how COVID-19 has dented Africa's aviation industry.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. You're watching news making headlines right here on Africa Live. It's time now for your business news. South Africa has unveiled its biggest spending plan ever to shore up an economy devastated by the fallout from the coronavirus pandemic. According to President Cyril Ramaphosa, around $6 billion of the required $26 billion would be reprioritized from the country's current budget. The remainder would be sourced from international groups such as the IMF and local sources. Of the total spending amount, there would be roughly $11 billion in guarantees for banks to lend, and over $5 billion would be set aside to protect and create jobs. Africa's most industrialized economy also aims to allocate more than $2.5 billion for welfare grants for the poor and unemployed. Well, staying in South Africa, the government says it will work with unions to ensure that a new viable and competitive airline emerges from the South African Airways business rescue process. Last December, SAA was placed in voluntary business rescue, and the government announced that it would avail $272 million to the airline to deal with its short-term liquidity problems. But of that package, the government was only able to secure $139 million, and SAA ran out of money in mid-January. The cash-strapped airline is currently fighting for its survival after suspending a large number of domestic and international flights over the global coronavirus pandemic. Well, staying with aviation matters, African airlines have incurred losses of more than $4 billion since the global outbreak of COVID-19. Nigeria's losses are projected at $170 million by the International Air Transport Association. Key players in the aviation industry are relying on the government for funding and other life support the sector needs for its survival. CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam tells us more.
The global outbreak of the coronavirus pandemic has put the aviation industry through its darkest moments in history. Activities have since ground to a halt following local and international travel bans. The aviation value chain in Nigeria is a huge employer of labor. Service providers like travel agencies, caterers, airport chain stores, taxi operators, and aviation fuel suppliers have all shut down. The International Air Transport Association estimates losses of about $170 million, and experts project that could be even worse.
So I think that figure may even be conservative. If this lasts longer, in the first month, we'll probably be losing close to 100 billion naira in losses for the Nigerian aviation sector alone. And we'll probably also be losing in excess of about close to 1 million passenger traffic that perhaps would have flown within this period, within a 1 month period. So it's really going to be huge loss on the aviation sector. Not only the service providers, not only the airlines, government, NAMA, NCA, FAN alone will lose in excess close to 2 billion naira in passenger service charge and other related services.
The situation has left the industry in dire need of support to overcome the crisis. Key players are looking to government for funding, loans and tax reliefs. So far, the Central Bank of Nigeria announced a $130 million funding facility to the aviation sector.
The CBN has promised to raise that particular facility, I think by another 100 billion or thereabout. The federal government has also announced plans to also interface with experts in the aviation industry to see the extent of loss and how they can come in to mitigate some of these losses. So on the federal government side, we've not seen the extent of that commitment yet until that happens, until the meeting happens and then they announce their level of palliative. So we can't really assess how that will impact them going forward. But again, the facility at the CBN, yes, if they access that, it could really help them maybe keep some jobs, and also be able to service the aircraft.
Nigeria's aviation industry contributed 0.14% to the economy in 2019, up from 0.12% in the previous year. Full recovery of the industry is projected to happen around 2020. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Ratings agency Moody's has placed Tunisia on review for a downgrade as the country faces weak near-term growth amid the coronavirus pandemic. Tunisia's central bank, which has a B2 rating and is responsible for the repayment of the government's bonds, is also on review for a possible downgrade. CGTN's Adnan Shuashi examines what the decision means for the North African economy.
Analysts maintain that Moody's decision to place Tunisia's ratings on review for downgrade shows the lack of confidence in the North African country's economic stability and its capacity in dealing with the negative impact of the coronavirus pandemic.
Moody's is clearly giving Tunisia 3 months to prove that it's capable of redressing economic indicators and limiting the factors of coronavirus crisis. The repercussions are the whole world, not just Tunisia. The crisis is inescapable, even after the designated period.
The editor-in-chief of alboursa.com, Tunisia's top economic and financial analysis platform, adds that the country's external financing options are very limited.
Tunisia relies on external funding sources. This will be problematic on the international market because the funding rate will be around at least 9%. It's impossible for Tunisia to seek such an affordable financing because the 2020 complementary state budget and expenses will be much higher than expected.
The Finance Commission at the House of the People's Representatives has shed light on Moody's evaluation of the situation in Tunisia.
The situation is alarming. The economic slowdown in the whole world does not help Tunisia reach its objectives. Implementing the necessary economic and social reforms is costly. Some of the resources which were dedicated to reform and development are used in fighting the pandemic. We don't even know how or when it ends.
Moody's statement also reads that a downgrade would be likely if there were delays in the availability of or marked increase in the cost of external funding, or a significantly more severe deterioration in Tunisia's fiscal and debt metrics. Analysts maintain that the current crisis will hit the pillars of the Tunisian economy, especially the tourism, export and service sectors. Authorities say they are acting in a proactive way so as to introduce a package of mid-term reforms designed to support the national economy in the aftermath of the coronavirus pandemic. Aden Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Lockdowns imposed to halt the spread of COVID-19 have resulted in unprecedented reductions in air pollution across the globe. According to experts, major cities that suffer from the world's worst air pollution are seeing reductions of deadly particulate matter by up to 60% from the 2019 levels. From London, here's CGTN's Nicole Johnston.
Clear skies across London as pollution falls to its lowest level since recording started in the city 20 years ago. The level of nitrogen dioxide in the capital, caused by diesel fumes, has halved. But tiny particle pollution, which comes from road traffic, construction and agriculture, has not fallen as far. Simon Burkett, the director of Clean Air in London, says that's because strong easterly winds over the last few weeks have brought particle pollution from the rest of Europe to the UK.
There's no safe level of exposure to particles. They are really very dangerous. And we've been hit by 2 or 3 episodes of particles and also ozone, which is when sun reacts with other combustion like gas heating and cooking fumes. And the levels of particles that we've seen have triggered moderate and even code red high pollution alerts across the southern UK.
In London, traffic has dropped by more than 40%. Offices are empty and most planes are grounded. Euston is normally one of the most polluted areas in London. In January, the nitrogen dioxide per cubic metre of air here was 125% above the legal limit. But since the lockdown started, it's dropped, and it's now well within a safe level. It's estimated air pollution causes 40,000 early deaths per year in the UK. This month, a Harvard University study found that dirty air increases the risk of suffering from severe symptoms of COVID-19.
Scientists in the US have found is that even small increases in historic levels of air pollution have resulted in really dramatically higher death rates from coronavirus. And that's sadly probably not surprising because air pollution causes respiratory problems and it is a respiratory disease.
Despite efforts to reduce it, London's nitrogen dioxide levels are normally twice as high as the World Health Organization's recommended limit for human health. But since lockdown, it's been well below. And when the lockdown ends, the concern is the pollution will return. and the joy of exercising in clean air will be quickly forgotten. Nicole Johnston, CGTN, London.
It's time now for us to take a short break and return. More news, including amid the coronavirus pandemic, musicians go online to entertain their fans.
Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes. The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. Well, while millions of people viewed Italian opera singer Andrea Bocelli's concert on Easter Sunday via the web, other musicians and artists have also been bringing joy and happiness to their fans via the internet since the start of the coronavirus pandemic. Angela Coppola reports from Johannesburg.
People are using the coronavirus lockdown to explore their talents and make music. But the lockdown has brought challenges and opportunities.
I make music with another person, Christian Porter, and we cannot come together to make music usually. And a lot of the times artists depend on money from their shows in order to make a living, in order to make any form of money. And now a lot of these applications have brought support systems for these artists where you can donate. For example, on SoundCloud you can pay someone in order to get their album pre-release, for example.
The lockdown has, though, helped musicians.
It took us a month to get 1,000 plays, and it's taken us 4 days to get 700 plays. So it's a drastic change in viewership, however, it's not a change in what we get paid.
Musicians, artists and other creatives are finding the enforced solitude useful.
I have been working on more because I've been home alone. Obviously the boredom comes, but the creativity still trumps over that boredom. So I've been working more and more on music.
One of the boons of this lockdown in South Africa is the fact that young, up-and-coming and sometimes struggling artists and musicians now get an opportunity for more airplay as people search online. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Well, your sport news is coming up next. Here's a highlight. Rwandese club APR eyeing a group stage appearance in the CAF Champions League.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Let's now take a look at what's happening in the world of sport. We begin with football in Rwanda, which has grown immensely over the past few years. The national team has made 3 African Nations Championships finals in a row, inspiring the country's record league winners, APR, to aim for CAF Champions League group stage qualification for the first time. CGTN's Muhammad Abubakar tells us more.
Rwanda's most decorated football club, APR, has won 17 league titles, 8 domestic cups and 3 regional Kagame Interclub Cups in their glittering history. However, success on the continental scene has eluded them, and at the beginning of the 2019-2020 season, the Kigali Giants made a huge statement by securing the services of Moroccan tactician Adel Erad Mohammed. This is the man they hope will deliver them CAF Champions League football.
My coaching staff and I are very happy to be here in Rwanda, working with APR Football Club, such a reputable team. We are very much aware of the demands that come with big clubs all over Africa, particularly with APR. As we all know, they've won pretty much everything there is to win here. And when we took this job, the objectives were very clear: to win the league, the domestic cup, and most importantly, to qualify for the CAF Champions League group stages next season.
It did not take too long for the Moroccan to settle in. His instant impact has seen APR play free-flowing football this season and are yet to lose a match after 23 rounds. The team has also had more players getting picked for the national team.
I'm really proud and happy with their development. They've improved so much in a short period of time. I'm glad to see that my players are not only important for APR, but for the national team as well. My staff and I will continue doing our job, and we're happy if it helps the national team in any way.
Erad, who has also worked with Moroccan giants Raja Casablanca, also feels that participation in continental club football will play a huge role for Rwandan football to scale the heights.
I think if Rwandan clubs can at least make the group stage of the CAF Confederations Cup or even the Champions League, it will be great. This will play a massive contribution to the development of Rwandan players, and it will eventually go on to make the national team become better in the coming years.
For the players, playing in the lucrative stages of the CAF Champions League will provide them a shop window to market themselves to top clubs.
I think it will be another motivation to push us forward into the next stage, winning the league and also in the club Champions League. I think it's another motivation. That's a platform that one can use to get an opportunity outside of the country, because many teams are looking for players outside.
APR hold a 6-point lead at the top of the league table with 7 matches to go before the league was suspended due to the coronavirus pandemic as they gun for their 18th title. However, Champions League football will remain their main focus when action returns. Mohamed Abubakar for CGTN, Kigali, Rwanda.
Japan has not agreed to shoulder the additional cost for the